Bullies pants the shy girl in gym class. The next day, she made them bleed. Riley Donovan stood at the entrance of Westbrook High School with her backpack weighing heavy on her shoulders, watching the morning rush of students flood through the double doors like a river she'd have to cross. The building stretched wide and low across the Kansas suburb, brick walls the color of dried blood, windows reflecting the pale September sky. She'd been here 3 weeks now, and every morning felt like the first. That same knot in her stomach, that same urge to turn around and walk the 5 miles back to the apartment where her mother was probably still sleeping off her night shift at the hospital. The transfer had come suddenly. Her mother had taken the nursing position in Millridge without much discussion, pulling Riley from the only home she'd known in Colorado, from the dojo where she'd trained since she was small, from the memory of her father, who'd taught her the first kata before the deployment that took him overseas and the accident that made sure he never came back. Riley touched the small silver pendant at her throat, his dog tags cut down and smoothed, and forced herself to move forward. Inside, the hallways smelled like industrial cleaner and teenage desperation. Lockers slammed in percussion, voices bounced off cinder block walls, sneakers squeaked on linoleum worn smooth by decades of friction. Riley kept her head down, dark hair falling like a curtain around her face, and navigated by memory to her locker in the south wing. She'd learned to make herself small here, to move through spaces without disturbing the air, to become invisible in the way prey animals do when predators are near. But invisibility only works until someone decides to see you. "Hey, zombie girl." The voice cut through the hallway noise, and Riley felt every muscle in her back tighten. She didn't turn around. She knew who it was, Madison Keller, with her perfect blonde ponytail and her perfect white smile and her perfect talent for finding the exact words to make you feel like nothing. Madison ran Westbrook High the way generals run armies, through fear and hierarchy and the careful cultivation of power. "I'm talking to you." Closer now, and Riley could smell the expensive perfume, could feel the presence of Madison's crew behind her like a wall. There were 3 of them usually. Brittany Chen, who laughed at everything Madison said like it was scripture. Jessica Rawlings, quieter but meaner, the one who delivered the actual blows while Madison kept her hands clean, and Travis Keller, Madison's cousin, a linebacker who'd failed 11th grade once and seemed proud of it. Riley closed her locker carefully and turned. Madison stood with her arms crossed, designer jeans and a Westbrook Wildcats cheer jacket, flanked by her court. Other students flowed around them like water around stones, nobody making eye contact, everyone grateful it wasn't them. "Yeah," Riley's voice came out steady, and she was proud of that. "Yeah," Madison mimicked, making it sound childish. "You're in my spot." Riley glanced at the locker behind her. No name, no number assigned to Madison. Just the 9th locker from the end in a hallway full of them. "I was assigned this one." "Cool story. I've had this locker since sophomore year. Move." The thing was, Riley could move. She could request a new locker, could relocate to the north wing or the 2nd floor, could avoid this confrontation and everyone like it. That's what she'd been doing for 3 weeks. Sidestepping, accommodating, swallowing every small humiliation because her mother had enough to worry about without Riley causing problems at yet another school. But something in Madison's smile, something in the way Brittany was already giggling, made Riley's jaw tighten. "No," she said quietly. The hallway seemed to get quieter, though that might have been Riley's imagination. Madison's smile didn't fade. It sharpened. "What did you say?" I said no. "It's my locker." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Madison stepped closer, and Riley could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was measuring Riley up and finding her wanting. Riley was taller than Madison by maybe 2 inches, but she was thin in a way that looked breakable. All angles and wrists that seemed too delicate to hold anything heavier than a pencil. She wore thrift store jeans and a grey hoodie that had belonged to her father, sizes too big, and she knew what she looked like, poor, scared, alone. "You know what, zombie girl? Keep the locker. We'll just have to find other ways to welcome you to Westbrook." They left then, Madison's ponytail swishing, her crew trailing like satellites in orbit. Riley watched them go and felt the small victory turn sour in her mouth. She'd won this exchange, but she'd also just painted a target on her back in permanent ink. The rest of the day unfolded in the familiar rhythm of high school. English in room 204, where Mr. Patterson droned about symbolism in Steinbeck. Chemistry in the lab where Riley worked alone because no one wanted to be her partner. Calculus, where she actually understood the material but never raised her hand. Lunch was the worst. The cafeteria sprawled across the east side of the building, all long tables and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick. Riley had learned to time her entrance for the middle of the period when most people were already settled, when she could grab her food and find a seat at the far table near the emergency exit without drawing attention. Today, she got her tray, limp pizza, canned corn, an apple that had seen better days, and headed for her usual spot. But before she could reach it, someone's foot shot out and her ankle connected with it, and suddenly she was airborne. The tray flipped, pizza launching in a perfect arc, corn scattering like yellow rain, and Riley hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Laughter exploded around her. Not everyone. Some people kept eating, some looked away, but enough. Enough that Riley felt the heat rise in her face as she pushed herself up on hands scraped raw, as she saw the pizza sauce on her hoodie, as she heard Madison's voice calling out, "Careful, zombie girl, you might hurt yourself." Riley didn't look up. She gathered her tray, picked up what she could reach of the scattered food, while a lunch monitor shuffled over to deal with the mess. Nobody helped her. Nobody asked if she was okay. She dumped the tray and walked out of the cafeteria without eating, without looking back, and spent the rest of the period in the bathroom, washing her hands over and over until they felt clean. After school, she walked home because the bus meant confined space with Madison and her crew, and Riley had learned that confined spaces were dangerous. The walk took 40 minutes through residential streets lined with trees just starting to turn gold and red, past houses with manicured lawns and two-car garages, past the kind of American normalcy her mother had promised they'd have here. The apartment complex where they lived sat on the edge of town, a cluster of beige buildings around a parking lot full of old cars. Their unit was on the second floor, small and still mostly unpacked, boxes stacked in corners, waiting for energy her mother never had. Riley let herself in to silence. Her mother wouldn't be home until after midnight. She dropped her backpack on the futon they'd bought at Goodwill and went to her room, barely bigger than a closet, with a mattress on the floor and her clothes in plastic bins. But in the corner, carefully wrapped in a canvas bag, was the one thing she'd insisted on bringing: her GI, the white uniform from her dojo back in Colorado, and the black belt she'd earned 3 years ago under Sensei Morrison's watchful eye. She hadn't trained since the move, hadn't found a new dojo, hadn't practiced her katas, hadn't even thought about it much because thinking about karate meant thinking about her father, about the way he'd taught her to stand and breathe and move with purpose. It hurt too much, so she'd packed it away. But now she pulled the G out and held it up to the fading light from her window. The fabric was soft from washing, the belt worn smooth. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Karate isn't about fighting, Riley girl. It's about balance, internal and external. You have to know yourself before you can face anyone else." She'd been 8 when he told her that, standing in their backyard in Colorado Springs while he walked her through the first kata, patient and smiling. 3 years later, he was dead, an IED in Afghanistan, and Riley had thrown herself into training like it could bring him back. Sensei Morrison had understood. He'd pushed her harder than the other students, had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. Discipline, focus, the ability to take pain and transform it into precision. But that was then. Here, now, in this small apartment in Kansas, Riley was just the weird new girl with scraped palms and pizza sauce on her hoodie. She folded the GI carefully and put it back in its bag. Training alone would just make her feel worse, would remind her of everything she'd lost. The next morning, Riley timed her arrival to the last possible minute before first bell, slipping into the building with the stragglers. She made it to English without incident, sat through Patterson's lecture on Steinbeck's use of light imagery, took notes in the margins of her paperback. But in chemistry, when she reached into her backpack for her textbook, she found it wasn't there. In its place was a torn notebook, pages scribbled with crude drawings and words she wouldn't repeat. Her actual textbook turned up in the trash can outside the lab, soaked in something sticky and sweet that smelled like Red Bull. Riley fished it out while other students watched, wiped it clean as best she could with paper towels, and sat through class with the pages drying in a crinkled mess. The teacher, Mrs. Yee, noticed but said nothing. At lunch, Riley skipped the cafeteria entirely and ate her packed sandwich in the library, tucked between stacks in the biography section where nobody ever went. The librarian, Mr. Jacobson, was an older man with reading glasses on a chain who mostly ignored students as long as they didn't cause trouble. Riley liked him because he didn't ask questions. But you can only hide for so long in a building designed to force social interaction. Gym class was fifth period, and there was no avoiding it. Westbrook High's gymnasium was a cathedral to small-town sports glory, banners hanging from the ceiling for every championship the Wildcats had won in football, basketball, volleyball. The hardwood floor gleamed under industrial lights, and the air always smelled like sweat and floor polish. Coach Brennan ran the class with the enthusiasm of someone who'd peaked in high school and never quite moved on. His whistle perpetually around his neck, his Wildcats polo shirt tucked into shorts that were slightly too tight. Riley changed quickly in the locker room, pulling on the required white t-shirt and navy shorts, keeping her head down as other girls chatted and laughed around her. Madison was there with Brittany and Jessica, all three of them on the volleyball team, all three of them moving with the easy confidence of people who belonged. Riley tied her shoes and slipped out before they could notice her. The unit was volleyball, of course it was, and Coach Brennan divided them into teams with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been picked last. Riley ended up on a team with 5 other girls, none of whom would look at her. Madison's team was stacked with athletes. It wasn't a game, it was an execution. For 40 minutes, Riley tried. She served when it was her turn, missed more than she made. She set when the ball came near her, sent it spinning wrong. Her teammates didn't pass to her, didn't call her name, didn't acknowledge her existence, except to sigh when she messed up. Madison's team won 25-8, then 25-6 in the second set. Through it all, Madison smiled her perfect smile and made sure to spike the ball directly at Riley whenever possible, sending her scrambling, sending her to the floor. Coach Brennan blew his whistle. Hit the locker rooms. Hustle up. Riley was grateful for escape. She headed for the girls' locker room with the rest of them, ready to change as fast as possible and disappear. But when she rounded the corner from the gym into the hallway that led to the locker rooms, someone shoved her from behind, hard enough that she stumbled forward, her hands hitting the wall to catch herself. "Oops," Jessica's voice, flat and insincere. Riley turned and found herself surrounded. Madison, Brittany, Jessica, and 2 other girls from the volleyball team. Hannah Pratt and Zoe Lang, both seniors, both looking at Riley like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. They'd blocked the hallway, 5 of them forming a wall between Riley and escape. "You're really bad at volleyball," Madison said conversationally. Riley's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice level. "Yeah, not really my sport. What is your sport?" Looking pathetic, Brittany laughed on cue. Riley tried to sidestep to move around them, but Jessica shifted to block her. They were hurting her, she realized, pushing her deeper into the hallway, away from the gym where Coach Brennan might intervene, toward the locker room where anything could happen. "Let me through." Or what? Madison stepped closer. "What are you going to do, zombie girl?" Cry? Riley's hands curled into fists at her sides, and she forced them to relax. She could feel her father's training trying to surface, the muscle memory of stances and strikes, the awareness of distance and leverage. 5 against 1. She could probably take Madison. The girl had no training. All her power was social. Jessica was the real threat, athletic and mean. But 5 against 1, in a high school hallway, with security cameras and consequences, she unclenched her fists. "I just want to change." Then change. Madison's smile widened. "Right here." Riley's stomach dropped. "What?" "You heard me. You want to get to your locker? Strip? Show everyone what zombie girl's hiding under those baggy clothes." The hallway suddenly felt too small, the walls too close. Other girls were emerging from the gym now, heading toward the locker room, and they could all see what was happening. Most of them looked away. A few pulled out phones. "No," Riley said. "No." Madison looked at her crew. Did she just say no again? Remember what happened last time she said no? Jessica moved fast, her hand shooting out to grab Riley's shirt. Riley twisted away, but Brittany caught her arm, surprisingly strong, and then Hannah had her other arm and Riley was being dragged backward into the locker room, struggling but not fighting. Not really, because fighting meant revealing herself and she wasn't ready for that. They pushed her into the center of the locker room, between the rows of lockers, where the benches formed an arena. More girls were filtering in now, a crowd forming, some protesting weakly but nobody intervening. Madison stood in front of Riley with her hands on her hips. "Last chance. Strip, or we'll do it for you." Riley's breath came fast and shallow. She looked around for help, for a teacher, for anyone with authority, but there was only Coach Brennan's voice echoing from the gym, oblivious. She looked at the girls watching, some with phones up now recording, and she saw the future branching ahead of her, humiliation recorded and posted online, spread through the school like wildfire, following her forever. Or she could fight back right now, use what her father taught her, drop Madison with a palm strike and Jessica with a sweep, and then what? Get expelled? Prove she was exactly what Madison said, violent and dangerous? Ruin her mother's fresh start? She stood there frozen in calculation, and that moment of hesitation cost her everything. Jessica and Hannah grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. Riley struggled, but Brittany had her legs now, and Madison stepped forward with that smile, that terrible smile, and hooked her fingers into the waistband of Riley's gym shorts. "Stop," Riley managed, her voice breaking. "Don't!" Madison pulled, yanking down both Riley's shorts and underwear in one brutal motion. Riley felt the fabric slide down her legs, felt the air on her skin, felt the explosion of laughter and gasps and phone cameras flashing. She twisted hard and broke free from their grip, stumbling forward, falling to her knees on the cold tile floor. She grabbed her clothes and pulled them up with shaking hands, her face burning, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. The laughter echoed off the locker room walls. Madison was doubled over, Jessica was high-fiving Brittany, and at least a dozen girls had watched it happen. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked away, but none of them had stopped it. Riley stood up slowly, her shorts back in place, her dignity scattered on the floor with her dropped gym bag. She looked at Madison, and she saw the triumph there, the satisfaction. This was the price for saying no. This was the lesson. Without a word, Riley picked up her bag and walked out. She didn't go back to her locker. She didn't change clothes. She walked straight out of the gymnasium, through the side door that led to the parking lot, across the lot to the street beyond. Nobody tried to stop her. She kept walking past the school grounds, past the football field where afternoon practice was starting, past the Sonic Drive-In where Westbrook students hung out after school. She walked the 5 miles home in her gym clothes while the afternoon sun beat down and her phone buzzed in her bag with notifications she didn't check. When she reached the apartment, she went straight to her room and pulled out the canvas bag. She unrolled her GI and held it against her chest, feeling the weight of it, the memory of her father's hands adjusting her collar. She thought about what he would say if he could see her now, broken and humiliated and running away. He'd say, "Get up." He'd say, "Balance." He'd say, "You're stronger than this." Riley spread the GI on her mattress and looked at it for a long time. Then she changed into it, tying the belt with precise movements, muscle memory taking over. The fabric felt right against her skin, familiar and grounding. She stood in the center of her tiny room and began the first kata, the one her father had taught her when she was 8. Her movements were rusty at first, her balance off, her breathing uneven, but kata was meditation in motion, and slowly she felt herself settle. Her father's voice guided her. Center yourself. Find your breath. Every movement has purpose. She moved through the kata once, twice, 3 times, until sweat darkened her gi and her muscles burned with the good pain of exertion. When she finally stopped, breathing hard, she felt something shift inside her. Not rage, not yet. Something colder and more focused. She thought about tomorrow, about walking back into that school, about facing Madison and her crew and everyone who'd watched and done nothing. She thought about the video that was probably already spreading through social media, about the humiliation that would follow her through every hallway. And she thought about the black belt around her waist, earned through years of discipline and pain, the skill she'd hidden because she'd thought blending in was safer than standing out. She'd been wrong. Riley showered and changed into regular clothes by the time her mother came home from her shift. They ate dinner together, spaghetti from a box, garlic bread from the freezer. And her mother asked about school, and Riley said it was fine because what else could she say? Your daughter got humiliated today, and there's a video online, and her whole world is burning. Her mother had enough weight on her shoulders. After dinner, Riley went back to her room and finally checked her phone. 37 messages, most from numbers she didn't recognize, links to the video, laughing emojis, crude comments. She deleted them all without watching. But there was one message from an unknown number that was different. "I'm sorry." That was messed up. Lucas Riley stared at the message. Lucas. She thought she knew who that was. Lucas Wade sat 2 rows ahead of her in English, played guitar in the school jazz band, seemed nice, but they'd never spoken. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. Sleep came hard that night. Riley lay on her mattress staring at the ceiling, replaying the day over and over, feeling the hands grabbing her, the laughter echoing. But beneath the humiliation, something else was growing. A cold determination, a decision crystallizing. Tomorrow she would go back. Tomorrow she would not run. Tomorrow would be different. When Riley walked through the doors of Westbrook High the next morning, every head turned. She felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers following her like a wake. The video had spread. Of course it had. By now half the school had seen it, had laughed at it, had shared it. She was infamous, but she wasn't running. She wore her usual clothes, jeans and her father's hoodie, but she walked differently, shoulders back, head up, eyes forward. She'd spent the evening practicing kata until her body remembered who she was, and now she moved with purpose. Students parted for her without realizing why, some instinct telling them that the girl walking down the hallway wasn't the same one who'd fled yesterday. Madison was waiting at Riley's locker with her crew, and of course she was. This was theater, performance, the queen establishing dominance. A crowd had already gathered, anticipating drama, phones ready. Look who came back, Madison said as Riley approached. "I thought maybe you'd transferred." You know, out of embarrassment. Riley stopped in front of her locker in front of Madison and said nothing. She just looked at Madison, really looked at her, seeing past the pretty face to the insecurity underneath, the desperate need to be feared, because being liked was too much work. "You're in my spot," Madison continued, her smile sharpening. Riley reached past her and opened her locker. The crowd murmured, this wasn't following the script. Madison's face darkened. "Did you hear me, zombie girl? I heard you." Riley's voice was calm, almost gentle. She pulled out her English textbook. "You should know, my name is Riley. I don't care what you're... Riley Donovan. If you're going to harass me, at least use my actual name." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Nobody talked to Madison like this. Jessica stepped forward, her hand reaching for Riley's shoulder, and Riley moved without thinking. A small sidestep, a turn of her body, and Jessica's hand met empty air. It looked like an accident, like Riley had just happened to move at the right moment, but Jessica stumbled slightly and had to catch herself on a locker. "Watch where you're going," Riley said mildly. Madison's eyes narrowed. "You think you're funny?" "No, I think I'm going to class." Riley closed her locker and walked away through the crowd that parted for her again, leaving Madison standing there with her crew, script abandoned, power questioned. Riley felt their eyes on her back all the way to English, but she didn't look back. She slid into her seat and pulled out her copy of East of Eden, opening to where they'd left off. Lucas Wade glanced back at her from his seat 2 rows up, and she met his eyes and nodded once. "Thank you for the message." He nodded back, something like respect crossing his face. Mr. Patterson shuffled in and began his lecture, but Riley could barely focus. Her heart was hammering, adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd faced Madison down, had walked away instead of running, and it felt like victory even though nothing had really changed. The video still existed, the humiliation still echoed, but she'd shown up. Chemistry passed in a blur. Nobody touched her stuff this time, though she caught Jessica glaring at her from across the lab. In calculus, she actually raised her hand to answer a question, and when she got it right, the teacher, Ms. Park, looked surprised but pleased. Lunch was the test. Riley packed her own food now, sandwich, apple, water bottle, and when the period started, she walked into the cafeteria instead of hiding. Every conversation seemed to pause as she entered. She could feel the weight of their attention, the memory of yesterday's fall, but she kept walking. Her usual table near the emergency exit was empty, and she headed for it with steady steps. She almost made it. Travis Keller stepped into her path, all 200 pounds of linebacker muscle and failed academic ambition. "Hey, you think you can just disrespect my cousin like that?" Riley looked up at him. He had 6 inches on her easy and said, "I think I can go to my table and eat my lunch." "I don't think so." He reached for her tray. Riley moved. It was instinctive, trained, the kind of movement that came from 1,000 repetitions. She shifted her weight, turned her hips, and suddenly she was past him, his hand closing on empty air. The tray stayed level, not a drop spilled, and she kept walking like nothing had happened. Behind her, Travis made a confused sound. The cafeteria had gone quiet, everyone watching. Riley reached her table and sat down, unpacking her lunch with hands that didn't shake, and slowly the noise resumed. Conversations starting again, but different now, speculative. She ate her lunch in peace. Nobody bothered her. When she looked up once, she saw Madison across the cafeteria, staring at her with an expression that wasn't quite anger, something colder, more calculating. Riley held her gaze until Madison looked away first. After lunch, Riley found a note tucked into her English textbook. "Library after school. East Stacks. Someone who can help. -JJ Mr. Jacobson?" Riley turned the note over, but there was nothing else. She tucked it into her pocket and went to her afternoon classes, with the feeling that something was shifting. that the story was entering a new chapter. The school day ended with 7th period world history, and Riley packed her bag slowly, waiting for the halls to clear before heading to the library. The building was quieter in the after-school hours. Most students fled to sports practice or parking lot hangouts. The library was nearly empty when Riley pushed through the doors. Just a few students at computers and Mr. Jacobson at the main desk. He looked up when she entered and gave her a small nod toward the east stacks. Riley walked past the circulation desk, through the reference section into the narrow aisles of older books that nobody checked out anymore. And there, sitting on the floor with his back against the biography section, was a man she'd never seen before. He was older, maybe 70, with grey hair pulled back in a ponytail and a weathered face that suggested time spent outdoors. He wore jeans and a denim shirt and reading glasses perched on his nose, a worn paperback open in his hands. He didn't look up when Riley approached. "You're late," he said. "I didn't know I had an appointment." "You don't. But timing is important in any discipline." He closed his book. Riley caught a glimpse of the cover, something about Zen Buddhism, and looked up at her. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "You're the girl from the video." Riley's stomach tightened. "Is that why you wanted to see me? To gawk?" "No. I wanted to see if you'd show up." He stood with the ease of someone who practiced staying flexible, and Riley realized he was taller than she'd thought, well over 6 feet, with a straight posture that spoke of military bearing. "I'm James Bridger. I teach a class here sometimes, volunteer basis, self-defense for students who need it." "I don't need self-defense." "Really?" He tilted his head. "Then what do you need?" Riley started to say nothing, started to walk away, but something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't mocking her. He was genuinely asking, like her answer mattered. "I need them to stop," she said quietly. "Them. All of them. The ones who did it. The ones who watched. The ones who'll keep doing it because nobody ever stops them." James Bridger nodded slowly. "That's a tall order. And you can't control what other people do. You can only control yourself." "Then what's the point?" "The point," he said, "is that when you control yourself completely, other people's actions stop mattering as much. You become unmovable, untouchable. Not because you're physically invincible, but because you've found your center and nothing can knock you off it." Riley thought about yesterday, about the hands grabbing her, about the moment she'd frozen because she was afraid of the consequences. How do you learn that? Same way you learn anything worth knowing. Slowly, painfully, with dedication. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. It was simple, just a name and an address in neat print. James Bridger, 1847 Industrial Way. "I teach in an old warehouse on the east side of town. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 6 to 8. Sunday mornings, 9 to 11. No charge, no questions. You come or you don't." Riley took the card, feeling the weight of the choice in her hand. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I was you once. Long time ago. Different war. Same battlefield." He picked up his book again, settling back against the shelves. "Also because Mr. Jacobson is my brother-in-law, and he told me there was a girl here who needed to learn how to stand without falling. He's usually right about these things." Riley looked toward the main desk, where Mr. Jacobson was very deliberately not watching them. She turned back to James Bridger. "What do you teach?" "Everything useful, but mostly I teach balance." That word again. The same word her father had used. Riley closed her hand around the card. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long." Next class is tomorrow evening. Riley walked out of the library with the card burning in her pocket. She thought about it all the way home, through dinner with her mother, through her evening homework. She thought about Madison's smile and Jessica's hands and the laughter echoing off tile walls. She thought about her father's voice, teaching her kata in their backyard. At 9 o'clock, she pulled out the card and looked at the address. Industrial Way was clear across town, nearly an hour's walk. Tuesday evening would mean missing dinner, getting home after dark. Her mother would worry, but Riley thought about tomorrow and the day after and all the days stretching ahead of her at Westbrook High. She thought about running and hiding and being small. She thought about balance. At 5:30 the next afternoon, Riley told her mother she was joining a study group and would be back by 9. It wasn't quite a lie. She was going to study something. Her mother was too tired from back-to-back shifts to ask many questions. Riley left the apartment and walked east, out of the residential neighborhoods, past the commercial district, into the industrial area where warehouses lined the streets like sleeping giants. 1847 Industrial Way was a low concrete building with high windows and a dented metal door. No sign, no indication of what happened inside. Riley stood outside for a full minute, heart pounding, before she pushed the door open and stepped in. The interior had been converted into a training space. Mats covered the floor, heavy bags hung from ceiling beams. A wall of mirrors reflected the empty space. The air smelled like sweat and effort and something else. Something clean like eucalyptus. James Bridger stood in the center of the space wearing a simple black GI, stretching in the methodical way of someone going through a routine. He glanced up when Riley entered. "You came." "Yeah. Anyone else coming?" Riley looked around the empty warehouse. "I thought you said you taught a class." "I do. Right now, you're it." He gestured to a door at the back. "There's a locker room, small but functional. I keep spare training clothes in various sizes. Find something that fits, change, and come back." Riley found the locker room. Concrete floor, a few benches, a rack of clean GIs in white and black. She changed into a white one that fit reasonably well and rejoined James on the mat. He looked her over with an appraising eye. "You've trained before," he said. It wasn't a question. "Karate. 3 years back in Colorado." "What rank?" Riley hesitated, then decided honesty was required here. "Black belt, 1st degree." James's eyebrows rose. "And you let them..." He stopped himself. "No. I'm not going to ask about that. What's past is past. We start from now." He moved to the center of the mat and gestured for Riley to join him. "Here's the truth. You already know how to fight. What you need to learn is when to fight, and more importantly, when not to." "I thought you were going to teach me self-defense." "I am. Self-defense isn't about throwing punches. It's about not needing to. It's about presence, confidence, awareness. When you carry yourself right, most confrontations never happen." He demonstrated a stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, hands relaxed at his sides. "Show me your ready position." Riley fell into the stance she'd learned at her old dojo, the one her father had taught her. James walked around her, adjusting her shoulders slightly, pressing on her hips to test her balance. "Good foundation. But you're tense, you're ready to explode. That's warrior stance, not guardian stance." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Guardian means you're strong enough to protect but calm enough not to need to. You're the immovable object, not the unstoppable force." They spent the next 2 hours working on stance, on breathing, on the subtle shifts of weight that made you stable or vulnerable. James didn't teach her any new techniques. Instead, he refined what she already knew, stripping away the aggression, the anger, leaving only the pure mechanical efficiency of motion. "Your father taught you well," James said near the end of the session, and Riley startled because she hadn't mentioned her father. "I can see his style in your movements." "Military, Marines. He died overseas." "I'm sorry." James handed her a water bottle. "He taught you to fight like a soldier." I'm going to teach you to stand like a mountain. There's a difference. Riley drank, her muscles burning pleasantly from the workout. Why do you do this? Teach for free? Because I spent 25 years in the army learning violence, and I need to spend the rest of my life teaching peace. He started gathering the training equipment. Come back Thursday, same time. We'll work on awareness drills. Riley changed back into her street clothes and walked home through the darkening streets. Her body was tired, but her mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. When she got back to the apartment, her mother was already asleep, and Riley fell into bed with sore muscles, and for the first time since the incident, the feeling that maybe she could handle tomorrow. Wednesday morning, Riley walked into Westbrook High and felt the difference immediately. Students still stared, still whispered, but she didn't shrink from it. She walked with the balanced posture James had taught her, grounded and aware, and something in her bearing made people step aside without her having to ask. Madison was waiting at Riley's locker again, because apparently this was going to be a daily performance. But today, when Madison opened her mouth to deliver some cutting remark, Riley turned to face her with such complete calm that Madison actually hesitated. "Morning, Madison," Riley said evenly. "Don't morning me like we're friends, zombie girl." "Then don't stand at my locker like you belong here." Riley opened her locker, got her books, closed it. "We can keep doing this every day if you want. But eventually, you'll get bored." "I don't get bored." Madison stepped closer, trying to use proximity as intimidation. Riley didn't step back, didn't step forward either, just stood there, balanced, unmovable. "Then I guess we'll keep meeting here," Riley said. "Have a good day, Madison." She walked away before Madison could respond, leaving the girl sputtering behind her. In English class, Lucas Wade turned around before the bell rang and said, "That was pretty cool this morning." "Thanks." "I mean it. Most people just take her abuse." Riley shrugged. "I'm tired of taking it. If you ever want to, sit with someone at lunch, my friends and I are usually in the courtyard. Just saying." Before Riley could respond, Mr. Patterson started his lecture. But she thought about the offer through the whole class, and when lunch period came, instead of eating alone, she walked out to the courtyard where Lucas sat with 3 other students. 2 guys and a girl, all of them dressed in that casual, artistic way that suggested they weren't part of the mainstream Westbrook social hierarchy. "Hey," Lucas said, looking genuinely happy to see her. "You came." "This is Tyler, Marcus, and Jade." "Riley," she said, and sat down on the brick planter wall next to them. Tyler, a lanky black kid with headphones around his neck, nodded at her. "You're the one who shut Madison down this morning. Respect." It wasn't that impressive. "Are you kidding?" Jade, short with purple streaks in her dark hair, leaned forward. "Nobody talks to Madison Keller like that. She's going to come after you hard." "She already did." Riley unwrapped her sandwich. "I'm still here." They ate together, talking about teachers and homework and the upcoming homecoming game. It was normal, almost painfully so, and Riley realized how much she'd missed just having people to sit with. When the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Marcus, quiet until now, with paint-stained fingers, said, "You should sit with us tomorrow too." Riley did, and the day after that. By Friday she had something resembling friends, and the school felt slightly less like enemy territory. But Madison wasn't done. Friday afternoon in gym class, Coach Brennan announced they were doing a fitness assessment, timed mile run, push-ups, sit-ups, the standard battery of tests that sorted students into visible categories of athletic or not. Riley lined up with the other girls for the mile, feeling Madison's eyes on her from the volleyball team cluster. When the whistle blew, Riley ran. She didn't sprint. James had taught her about pacing, about knowing your limits, but she ran steady and strong, breathing controlled, legs pumping with the efficiency of someone who'd done countless hours of conditioning. She passed Madison at the 3rd lap and heard the muttered curse behind her. Riley finished 4th out of 32 girls, her time good enough that Coach Brennan made a note on his clipboard and said, "Donovan, you ever think about joining track?" "No, sir." "Well, think about it. We could use someone with your stride." Behind him, Madison's face was red from exertion and anger. Jessica whispered something to her, and Riley saw the calculation in Madison's expression. She was losing ground, her target was slipping away from victim status, and that couldn't stand. Riley changed quickly in the locker room and got out before anything could happen, but she knew it was coming. Madison had been embarrassed twice now, once in the hallway, once on the track. People like Madison didn't forgive embarrassment. Thursday evening, Riley went back to the warehouse for her second training session with James. This time he focused on awareness, teaching her to read body language, to predict movement before it happened. "Most fights are decided before the first punch," he said, circling her on the mat. "The person who sees the threat first, who positions themselves correctly, who stays calm, they've already won." He'd attack from different angles without warning, never hard enough to hurt, just enough to test her reflexes. Riley learned to feel the shift in air pressure when someone moved behind her, to hear the soft scuff of a shoe before the strike came, to keep her peripheral vision active even while focused forward. "You're improving," James said at the end of the 2 hours. "How's school?" "Better. I made some friends." "Good." Friends are important. They remind you what you're protecting, not just yourself, but the people around you who deserve safety too. He handed her a water bottle. "The Bullies? They still active?" "The main one is Madison Keller. I think she's planning something." "Probably. Predators don't like it when prey stops acting afraid." He sat on the edge of the mat. "You know you could report her, right? Get administration involved." Riley laughed bitterly. "You think that would help? They'd investigate, maybe give her a slap on the wrist, and then she'd make my life 1,000 times worse. The only thing that stops people like her is losing power. How do you make her lose power?" "I don't know yet." James nodded slowly. "When you figure it out, remember, there's a difference between justice and revenge. Justice restores balance. Revenge just creates more chaos." Riley thought about that on her walk home. Justice versus revenge. Balance versus chaos. Her father's words echoed again. Karate isn't about fighting, it's about balance. Monday morning started with a fire drill. Shrill alarm cutting through first period, everyone filing out to the parking lot to stand in designated zones, while firefighters checked the building. "False alarm," someone said, "probably a pulled lever." Students milled around in the parking lot, teachers trying to maintain order, everyone grateful for the disruption to routine. Riley stood with Lucas and his friends near the art wing exits, watching the chaos. She spotted Madison across the lot with her crew, and their eyes met for a moment. Madison smiled, and Riley felt unease prickle down her spine. The all clear sounded, and everyone filed back in. Riley went to her locker to get her chemistry textbook and found it standing open. That was odd. She was sure she'd closed it. She reached inside, and her hand touched something wet and sticky. She pulled her hand back and found it covered in red. For a terrible moment she thought it was blood, but the smell was wrong. Ketchup and corn syrup, the fake blood they'd use in theater productions. Her locker had been filled with it while everyone was outside, the bottles positioned to spill when she reached in. Her textbooks were soaked, her notebooks ruined, red dripping down the metal interior. Students had stopped to watch. Some were laughing, others looked uncomfortable, but nobody helped as Riley stared at the destruction of her school supplies. Again. "Looks like Zombie Girl is bleeding out," Madison's voice carried across the hallway. Riley stood very still, fighting the urge to scream or cry or punch something. Instead, she thought about James's lessons about balance, about control. She pulled out what she could save, her calculator, her house keys, her pen, and closed the locker on the mess. "You're gonna need to clean that up," a voice said, and Riley turned to find Vice Principal Hodges standing there with his arms crossed, a stocky man with a permanent expression of annoyance. "School property. Someone vandalized my locker. Then you should have reported it instead of standing here. I just opened it 30 seconds ago. Not my problem. Clean it before the end of the day or there'll be consequences." He walked away before Riley could respond. She looked at Madison, who was watching with satisfaction. No proof, no witnesses willing to speak up, and Riley was left holding responsibility for someone else's cruelty. "I'll help you clean it," Lucas said, appearing at her elbow with paper towels from the bathroom. "This is bullshit." They spent their break period scrubbing red syrup out of Riley's locker while students passed and whispered. Riley didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just cleaned methodically, accepting help from Lucas and Jade, who showed up with more supplies. And by the time the bell rang for second period, her locker was as clean as she could make it, and most of her school supplies were garbage. At lunch, Lucas said, "You should report this to someone higher up. This has gone too far." "And say what?" "That I think Madison Keller did it, but I have no proof. That the video exists, but I don't want to talk about it because it's humiliating. The system doesn't work for people like me." "So what are you going to do?" Riley thought about balance, about justice versus revenge. "I'm going to make it stop." "How?" She didn't answer because she didn't know yet, but the answer was forming, crystallizing in her mind with every humiliation, every calculated cruelty. Madison had power because people feared her. Take away the fear, and the power crumbled. That night, Riley asked her mother about the incident in gym class, carefully, hypothetically. "If someone was bothering you at school, what should you do?" Her mother looked up from her medical journal, exhaustion deep in her eyes. "Tell a teacher. Tell me. Don't let it escalate." "But what if telling makes it worse?" "Riley," her mother set down the journal, "is someone bothering you at school?" "No," Riley lied. "Just a hypothetical." Her mother studied her for a long moment, then said, "Your father used to say that violence is the last resort of the incompetent. There's always a better way, but what if there isn't? Then you find the better way anyway. Because the alternative is becoming what you hate." Riley went to bed thinking about that. Becoming what you hate. She didn't hate Madison, not really. She hated what Madison represented, the casual cruelty, the abuse of power. But hate wasn't useful. Balance was useful. Control was useful. Tuesday and Thursday, she returned to the warehouse. James taught her more about reading situations, about de-escalation, about the physics of leverage, and how a smaller person could move a larger one with correct application of force. "You're not trying to hurt anyone," he emphasized. "You're trying to make hurting you more trouble than it's worth." There's a difference. He also taught her about the psychology of bullies. They need audience and predictability. Take away either one, and they lose power. They thrive on fear and reactions, show neither, and they don't know how to proceed. Sunday morning, Riley showed up for her first weekend session and found she wasn't alone. 3 other students were there, all adults, 2 women and a man, all training in the same principles James had been teaching her. They worked through drills together, practiced awareness exercises, learned to fall without injury and rise without hesitation. During a break, one of the women, Sarah, in her 40s with gray streaking her hair, said to Riley, "You're good." "How long have you been training with James?" "Couple weeks." "Could have fooled me. You move like someone with years of experience. I had some training before this." Sarah nodded knowingly. "We all had something before this. That's usually why we're here, to learn how to use it right." Riley thought about that throughout the rest of the session. Using it right, not using it at all, not using it wrong, but right. The precision of that distinction felt important. October slid into November and the Kansas weather turned cold. Leaves blanketed the ground in gold and brown, and students started wearing jackets and huddling inside between classes. Riley settled into her new routine: school, training, homework, repeat. She ate lunch with Lucas and his friends. She answered questions in class. She walked through hallways like she belonged there. Madison's harassment continued, but with less success. Riley's locker got egged once, but she cleaned it without comment. Someone spread a rumor that she was sleeping with Lucas, but Lucas just laughed it off, and Riley ignored it entirely. Madison tried to trip her in the cafeteria again, but Riley anticipated the move and sidestepped smoothly, and Madison was left looking foolish. Each failed attempt chipped away at Madison's power. Other students started to notice. Riley wasn't reacting the way victims were supposed to react. She wasn't crying, wasn't running, wasn't feeding the drama. And without drama, Madison's entertainment value diminished. But Riley knew it couldn't last. Eventually, Madison would escalate, because that's what bullies did when their usual tactics failed. The question was when and how. The answer came the week before Thanksgiving break. Westbrook High had a tradition, the Turkey Bowl, a flag football game between juniors and seniors on the Wednesday before break. It was supposed to be fun, casual, a way to burn off energy before the holiday. But at Westbrook, everything became a competition, and the Turkey Bowl was taken as seriously as any varsity game. Riley had no intention of playing. She wasn't on any sports teams, didn't care about school traditions, planned to skip the event entirely. But Lucas convinced her to at least come watch, since classes were shortened anyway. "It's actually pretty entertaining," he said at lunch Tuesday. "Everyone takes it way too seriously, and there's always drama." So Wednesday afternoon, Riley joined the crowd gathering on the football field. The weather was cold but clear, and students bundled in jackets lined the sidelines while the teams warmed up. Madison was playing for the juniors, of course, her volleyball athleticism on full display. The seniors had their own stars, including Travis Keller, who played on the varsity team and took this way too seriously. Riley stood with Lucas and his friends near the bleachers, watching the game begin. It was immediately clear this wasn't casual. Players dove for flags, made aggressive blocks that probably violated flag football rules, traded insults across the line of scrimmage. At halftime, the score was tied, and Coach Brennan announced a twist. Each team could recruit 3 non-players from the crowd to join for the second half. The seniors immediately grabbed their friends from the football team. The juniors looked around, and Madison's eyes landed on Riley. "You!" Madison called out, pointing. "Zombie girl, you're playing." Riley shook her head. "I'm good, thanks. It wasn't a request. We need 3 more players and you're a student. Coach, she has to play, right?" Coach Brennan shrugged. "If she's willing." "I'm not willing." "Oh, come on," Madison said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Scared you'll embarrass yourself?" Again? The crowd was watching now, sensing drama. Riley felt the pressure of their attention, the weight of the challenge. She could refuse and look scared, or accept and walk into whatever trap Madison was setting. Lucas leaned close. "You don't have to do this." Riley thought about balance, about not reacting the way Madison wanted. If she refused, Madison won by making her look cowardly. If she played, Madison had home field advantage and a crowd. But Riley had something Madison didn't: months of training in awareness, in reading situations, in staying calm under pressure. "Fine," Riley said, "I'll play." Madison's smile widened, and Riley saw the trap's jaws closing. But she walked onto the field anyway, joining the junior team with 2 other reluctant draftees. Madison pulled them aside. "Here's how this works. You stay out of my way and try not to completely suck. Riley, you're playing offense. When the ball comes to you, just run forward and hope for the best." The second half began, and Riley positioned herself on the line, the cold air stinging her lungs. The quarterback called the play and snapped the ball, and Riley ran her route, breaking toward the sideline. The pass came to her, overthrown, sailing high, and she had to jump to catch it. She snagged it and came down running, tucking the ball and cutting upfield. Two defenders converged on her, but Riley had trained with James for 8 weeks now, had learned to read body position and anticipate movement, and she juked left then right, leaving both defenders grasping at air where she'd been. She made it 15 yards before someone finally grabbed her flag. The junior sideline erupted in surprised cheers. Madison looked startled but recovered quickly, calling the next play. But Riley had glimpsed something. She was faster than they expected, more agile, and Madison's plan to humiliate her was backfiring. 3 plays later, Riley caught another pass and made it to the end zone, scoring a touchdown that put the juniors ahead. Her teammates, most of whom didn't know her, celebrated while Madison's expression grew darker. With 2 minutes left and the score tied again, the juniors had the ball. Madison called the play, her voice tight with frustration, and Riley saw it. Madison was going to throw to her, but it would be a setup. The pattern was obvious now, the way Madison's eyes tracked the seniors' positions, the way she smiled when she said, "Riley, go deep." Riley ran the route knowing exactly what was coming. The ball came to her, a perfect spiral, and as she reached up to catch it, 3 defenders converged, led by Travis, who wasn't trying to grab her flag. He was trying to hit her. Flag football be damned. Riley caught the ball and in the same motion dropped low, using her momentum and Travis's aggressive angle against him. She'd practiced this exact scenario with James, how to turn an attacker's energy into their own fall. Travis went over her, momentum carrying him past, and slammed into the ground hard enough to knock his wind out. Riley kept running, the ball secure, the end zone clear ahead. She crossed the line just as the final whistle blew, scoring the winning touchdown while Travis gasped for air behind her and the crowd erupted in shocked celebration. Riley tossed the ball to the ref and walked off the field while her junior teammates swarmed her, congratulating, celebrating. Madison stood frozen. Her plan to humiliate Riley transformed into Riley's triumph in front of half the school. Lucas met Riley on the sideline with a huge grin. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to move like that?" "Just lucky," Riley said. But she wasn't. It had been training, awareness, preparation meeting opportunity. She looked back and saw Madison stalking off the field, her crew following, and Riley knew this wasn't over. She'd just escalated things in the most public way possible. Madison couldn't let this stand. But for now, in this moment, Riley let herself enjoy the victory. Thanksgiving break passed quietly. Riley spent it with her mother, eating grocery store turkey and watching movies, grateful for the respite from Westbrook High's daily warfare. They didn't talk about school much, but her mother noticed the difference in Riley. She walked taller, smiled more, seemed less burdened. "Whatever you're doing," her mother said over pumpkin pie, "it's working. You seem more like yourself again." Riley thought about who herself was, the scared girl who'd arrived in Kansas, or the balanced fighter she was becoming. Maybe both. Maybe that was the point of balance, holding multiple truths at once. The following Monday, Riley returned to school knowing everything had changed. The turkey bowl had shifted perceptions. Students who'd never spoken to her before nodded in hallways. People asked her about joining track or basketball, and even some of Madison's peripheral followers seemed less hostile. But Madison herself was radioactive with rage. It started small, graffiti in the bathroom calling Riley crude names, anonymous notes in her locker with threats and insults. Riley ignored all of it, maintaining the calm James had taught her. In classes, she focused on her work. At lunch, she sat with Lucas and his friends. At training, she pushed herself harder, knowing the real confrontation was still coming. James noticed her intensity. "What's happening at school?" "The bully is escalating." "Expected. You took her power base. Now she'll get desperate." He adjusted her stance during a drill. Desperate people make mistakes. Stay smart. Riley carried those words through the next 2 weeks as Madison's campaign grew more aggressive. Someone slashed Riley's bike tires. Someone poured soda in her gym bag. Jessica shoved her into lockers twice in one day, hard enough to leave bruises. Riley documented everything, took photos, but didn't report it because she knew the administration was useless. What she was waiting for was the moment. The point where Madison would go too far in front of too many witnesses, where Riley could respond without looking like the aggressor. James had taught her patience, and Riley had learned to wait. The moment came during the second week of December, in the cafeteria during lunch period. Riley was sitting with Lucas, Jade, Tyler, and Marcus, eating and talking about final exams coming up after winter break. The cafeteria was packed, every table full, noise levels at their usual roar. Riley was laughing at something Tyler said, when suddenly ice-cold liquid splashed across her head and shoulders. She gasped, standing up, turning. Madison stood behind her with an empty, extra-large cup from Sonic, strawberry slush dripping down Riley's hair and face and clothes, pooling on the floor around her feet. The cafeteria went silent. That instant hush that happens when everyone knows something significant is occurring. Madison smiled her perfect smile, but there was desperation in it now, a need for this to work. "Oops," Madison said. "My hand slipped." Riley stood there, dripping, cold seeping through her clothes. Every eye in the cafeteria was on them. This was the moment Madison had orchestrated. Public humiliation. Riley's response would define her. React with anger and violence, confirm she was dangerous and uncontrolled. React with tears, confirm she was weak and broken. Walk away, confirm she was scared. Riley took a slow breath, finding her center, that place of balance James had taught her to cultivate. She felt the cold, acknowledged it, let it exist, without controlling her. She looked at Madison and saw not an enemy, but a desperate girl clinging to power that was already gone. "You know what, Madison?" Riley said quietly, her voice carrying in the silent cafeteria. "I'm done." "Done what? Done being pathetic? Done being afraid of you?" Riley pulled her soaked hoodie off, standing there in just her t-shirt, cold but unbothered. "You've been trying for months to break me. The video, the locker stuff, the constant harassment. And I keep showing up, I keep walking through these halls, I keep existing despite everything you do. So at this point, what do you have left? What's your next move?" Madison's smile faltered. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected Riley to turn it around, to take the power out of the moment. "My next move is making sure everyone remembers what a freak you are. They already do. Thanks to you, everyone knows me now. Some of them even like me." Riley gestured around the cafeteria. "Look around. Half these people are tired of your act. You keep everyone scared, but fear isn't the same as respect. You know the difference. I don't need your philosophy, zombie girl. It's Riley, Riley Donovan. And you're going to remember my name now, because I'm not disappearing, I'm not transferring, I'm not giving you what you want, which is my fear." Riley bent down and picked up her hoodie, wringing it out calmly. "So do your worst. I'll still be here tomorrow." She started to walk away, toward the cafeteria exit, toward ending this confrontation with dignity. But Madison couldn't let it end like that. Couldn't let Riley have the last word, couldn't accept the loss of control. "You think you're so tough now?" Madison called out, her voice shrill. "You think because you got lucky in some flag football game that you're better than me?" Riley stopped, turned slowly. "No, Madison. I think I'm better than this. Better than spending my energy making other people miserable. Better than needing to hurt people to feel powerful." She paused. "I actually kind of feel sorry for you." That did it. That broke whatever control Madison had left. She rushed forward, hand raised to slap or scratch or shove, and Riley saw her coming with perfect clarity, saw the angle of approach, the weight distribution, the wild emotion making Madison sloppy. Riley moved. It was simple, economical, the kind of defensive technique James had drilled into her 1,000 times. She sidestepped Madison's charge, caught her wrist as it swung past, used Madison's own momentum to guide her in a gentle arc that sent her stumbling forward, off balance. Madison's feet tangled and she went down hard on the cafeteria floor, landing on her knees with a sharp crack that made people wince. Riley let go of Madison's wrist and stepped back, hands up and empty, clearly defensive. "I don't want to fight you," she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Madison scrambled up, face red with humiliation and rage. "You're going to regret that." "Probably. But I'm okay with it." Jessica and Brittany rushed to Madison's side, helping her up, glaring at Riley with hatred. But the cafeteria crowd wasn't on Madison's side. Riley could feel it in the way students watched, in the murmurs spreading through the room. Madison had attacked, Riley had defended without excessive force, and everyone had seen it. "What is going on here?" Vice Principal Hodges pushed through the crowd, late as always. He looked at the scene, Riley dripping wet, Madison disheveled, the obvious signs of conflict. "My office! Both of you! Now!" Riley and Madison followed Hodges out of the cafeteria in tense silence. Behind them, the room erupted in conversation, phones coming out, the video already spreading. But this time, it would tell a different story. In Hodges' office, Riley and Madison sat in chairs while the vice principal glared at them both with equal frustration. "Explain." "She attacked me," Madison said immediately. "I was walking past her table and she jumped up and grabbed me." "That's not what happened," Riley said calmly. "Madison poured her drink on me. I started to walk away. She charged at me and I defended myself without throwing a punch." "You threw her to the ground!" "I redirected her momentum. There's a difference." Hodges rubbed his temples. "There are going to be consequences for both of you." "For what?" Riley asked. "Getting a drink poured on me? Defending myself, for disrupting the cafeteria and creating a scene." "I didn't create anything. I've been getting harassed for months. I've documented it." Riley pulled out her phone and showed him the photos. Slashed tires, vandalized locker, the threatening notes. "I've been waiting to report it officially because I knew you wouldn't take it seriously unless there were witnesses." "Well, there were about 200 witnesses today." Hodges looked at the photos with a grimace. "Why didn't you report this earlier? Would you have believed me over her?" Riley nodded toward Madison. The silence answered her question. Hodges sighed. "Madison, I'm going to need to call your parents. This is going to result in suspension." "Suspension? For what? She's the one who attacked. There's video already circulating, multiple witnesses. You poured a drink on another student and then attempted to physically assault her. That's clear cut." He turned to Riley. "You're not off the hook either. Physical altercation means automatic consequences. Even when defending myself, zero tolerance policy. So you're saying I should have just stood there and let her hit me?" Hodges didn't have a good answer to that. 3 days suspension for both of you, starting tomorrow. Madison erupted in protests, but Riley just nodded. 3 days at home was fine. She'd already demonstrated what needed demonstrating. The video would spread. Students would take sides, and Madison's reign was effectively over. They left Hodges' office, and in the hallway, Madison grabbed Riley's arm. "This isn't over." Riley looked at Madison's hand on her arm, then up at Madison's face. "Yeah, it is. You just don't realize it yet. You think you won? I'm going to destroy you. You already tried. Multiple times. And I'm still here." Riley gently removed Madison's hand. "The thing is, Madison, you can't destroy someone who's already been broken and put themselves back together. I'm stronger now than when I started. Every time you came at me, you just proved I could survive it." Madison's face twisted with frustration. "I hate you." "I know, but I don't hate you. I actually hope you figure out whatever's making you so angry all the time." Riley started walking away, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, you're really good at volleyball. If you spent half as much energy on that as you do on making people miserable, you'd probably be amazing." She left Madison standing there and went to finish out the school day. Students watched her walk through halls, some with respect, some with fear, some with curiosity. She didn't care anymore what they thought. She'd done what she needed to do. That evening, Riley went to the warehouse for training. James took one look at her still damp hair and raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Riley told him the whole story. When she finished, James nodded slowly. "You handled it well, defended without exceeding necessary force, made your point without losing control. I got suspended. Small price for dignity." He gestured to the mat. "Let's train. You've got 3 days off. Might as well use them productively." They worked through defensive techniques, refining Riley's responses, drilling until muscle memory took over completely. At the end of the session, James said, "You've come a long way these past few months. Your father would be proud." Riley felt tears prick her eyes, the first tears she'd allowed since this whole thing started. "You think so?" "I know so. You've taken everything thrown at you and stayed standing. That's warrior spirit." He paused. "But remember, this probably isn't completely over. Madison's lost a lot of face. She might try one more thing before she accepts defeat. Stay alert." Riley thought about that over her suspension. 3 days at home gave her time to catch up on schoolwork, train extra hours at the warehouse, and think about what came next. Lucas texted her updates. Madison had also been suspended. The video of the cafeteria incident had gone viral within the school. Opinion was decisively on Riley's side. Some of Madison's former friends were distancing themselves from her. When Riley returned to school Monday morning, she felt the shift immediately. Students greeted her in hallways, some she'd never spoken to before. Her locker was unmolested. In classes, people wanted to partner with her for projects. At lunch, her table with Lucas and his friends had expanded to include several others. Madison, also back from suspension, moved through the school like a ghost. Her crew had fragmented. Jessica still stuck close, but Brittany had migrated to other friends, and Travis was actively avoiding both his cousin and Riley. Madison no longer commanded fear. She was just another student now, stripped of her power. But James's warning echoed in Riley's mind. Stay alert. The attack came Friday afternoon, off school grounds, where security cameras and witnesses couldn't help. Riley was walking home as usual, taking her standard route through residential neighborhoods. The December air was cold, her breath fogging, and she was thinking about the English essay due Monday when a car pulled up beside her. Madison's silver SUV, expensive and threatening. The SUV stopped and Madison got out, flanked by Jessica and, surprisingly, 2 people Riley didn't recognize. Older, meaner-looking, probably not even students at Westbrook. Madison must have called in reinforcements, people willing to do what her school friends wouldn't. Riley's pulse kicked up, but she kept walking, angling toward the nearest house with lights on. Madison moved to block her path. Going somewhere, Riley. Home. You should do the same. Not until we settle this. Madison gestured to her crew. See, you embarrassed me. Made me look weak. I can't have that. Riley assessed the situation with the training James had drilled into her. 5 against 1. No witnesses. One avenue of escape toward the house, but they'd catch her before she reached the door. Madison was furious, but probably wouldn't actually fight. That's what the others were for. Jessica was athletic and angry. The 2 unknowns were the real threats. Madison, this is assault. You bring these people to jump me, there are legal consequences. Only if anyone finds out. Madison smiled. No cameras here, no witnesses. Just you getting what you deserve. For what? Defending myself? Existing? For being too stupid to know your place. Riley looked at the faces surrounding her and made a calculation. She could run, probably get away. She was fast. She could try to de-escalate, talk her way out, appeal to whatever humanity Madison had left. Or she could stand her ground and deal with the consequences. She thought about her father, about balance, about the difference between justice and revenge. She thought about every humiliation she'd endured, every moment she'd swallowed her pride and walked away. She'd been patient, she'd been peaceful. She'd given Madison every opportunity to stop, but some people didn't stop until you made them. Riley set her backpack down carefully. Last chance, Madison. Walk away. Madison laughed. Or what? Or I stop pulling my punches. One of the unknowns, a stocky guy with a shaved head, stepped forward. Big words for someone who's about to get... Riley moved before he finished the sentence. 3 months of training with James, years of karate before that, all condensed into pure, efficient motion. She closed the distance, struck the guy's solar plexus with a quick palm strike, and swept his legs before he could react. He went down hard, gasping for air. The second unknown rushed her, and Riley sidestepped, caught his arm, used his momentum to throw him into Madison's SUV with a crash that dented the door. Jessica came at her next, and Riley blocked, redirected, and with careful control swept Jessica's feet, sending her to the ground without serious injury. Madison stood frozen, eyes wide with shock. Riley turned to face her, breathing steady, balanced, unmoved. You want to come at me? Riley asked quietly. Or are you done? Madison's hands were shaking. You can't. I just did. And I held back. Madison, I could have hurt them badly. I didn't. I could hurt you. I won't. But you need to understand something. I'm done being your victim. I'm done being anyone's victim. You want to keep coming at me? I'll keep defending myself. And eventually I'll stop being so gentle. The first guy had managed to sit up, wheezing. The second was clutching his shoulder. Jessica was climbing to her feet, looking at Riley with newfound fear. Madison just stood there, her power broken, her intimidation failed. Go home, Madison, Riley said, and leave me alone. She picked up her backpack and walked past them, half expecting someone to try something from behind. But nobody moved. When she looked back from the end of the block, they were all still standing there in shock, and Riley knew with absolute certainty that this was finally over. She made it home shaking with adrenaline, her hands trembling as she unlocked the apartment door. She'd crossed a line today, used violence even though it was purely defensive. She'd proved she was dangerous even though she'd tried to be gentle, but she'd also proved she couldn't be broken. Riley called James that evening and told him what happened. There was a long pause, then, "You stayed controlled?" "Yeah, minimum necessary force. They going to press charges?" "Doubtful. They're the ones who jumped me with outside help." "Good. But Riley, this is probably going to have school consequences anyway. Someone will talk." Riley thought about that. Worth it? Maybe, but remember, violence, even in self-defense, leaves marks, not just physical ones. James paused. "How do you feel?" Riley considered the question honestly. Scared, relieved, guilty, proud, all of it at once. That's normal. That's being human. You did what you had to do, but it's okay to feel complicated about it. He paused. "You still coming to Sunday training?" "Definitely." "Good. We'll work on the aftermath, dealing with the emotional weight of confrontation. That's part of training too." The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety, waiting for consequences. But Monday morning came and nothing happened. No police at her door, no angry phone calls, no emergency meetings with administrators. Riley went to school, half expecting Madison to be waiting with new schemes, but Madison didn't even show up. She was absent Tuesday too, and Wednesday. By Thursday, rumors were spreading. Madison had transferred to a private school. Madison was being homeschooled. Madison's family was moving. Whatever the truth, Madison Keller was gone from Westbrook High. Riley sat in the cafeteria with Lucas and his friends, and the relief was palpable. "It's really over," Jade said. "She's actually gone." "How do you feel?" Lucas asked Riley. Riley thought about it. She felt lighter, yes, but also aware that the solution had involved violence, even controlled violence. She'd changed herself in fighting back, had become someone who could hurt people even if she chose not to. "I feel like I survived," she said finally. "That's enough for now." The rest of the school year unfolded with surprising normalcy. Riley joined the track team like Coach Brennan had suggested, finding she enjoyed the running, the way it cleared her head. She kept training with James twice a week, expanding beyond self-defense into deeper philosophy about balance and control. Lucas asked her to prom in March, and she said yes, and they went as friends and had a genuinely good time. Jessica and Brittany left her alone, gave her wide berth in hallways, treated her with wary respect. Travis graduated and left for college. The video from the locker room eventually faded from social media, replaced by newer scandals and dramas. Riley's mother noticed the changes in her daughter, the confidence, the calm, the sense of someone who'd been tested and passed. Over dinner one night, she said, "You're different than when we moved here." Is that good or bad? Good. You're more yourself, stronger but in a grounded way. Her mother reached across the table and took Riley's hand. "I'm proud of you. Your father would be too." Riley squeezed back, thinking about her father's lessons about balance, about how they'd carried her through the hardest months of her life. The last day of school in May, Riley cleaned out her locker. The same locker she'd fought to keep, the one Madison had claimed. She ran her hand over the metal door, remembering that first confrontation, how scared she'd been, how small. "Hey, Riley." Lucas appeared with Jade, Tyler, and Marcus. "We're heading to Sonic. You coming?" "Yeah, give me a minute." She closed her locker one final time and looked around the hallway. Next year, she'd be a senior. This place that had been a battlefield was now just a school. Still imperfect, still full of drama, but survivable. More than survivable. Livable. Riley thought about the journey from that first morning, standing at the entrance, terrified to go in, to now, walking out with friends and confidence and the knowledge that she could handle whatever came next. Balance, her father had said. Internal and external. She'd found it, finally. The balance between strength and gentleness, between standing her ground and knowing when to walk away, between defending herself and not becoming cruel in the process. She'd been broken down and built herself back up, piece by piece, kata by kata, confrontation by confrontation. She wasn't the same Riley who'd arrived in Kansas. She was stronger, wiser, scarred, but not broken, and that was enough. Riley joined her friends, and they walked out of Westbrook High together into the late afternoon sun. She thought about summer, about continued training with James, about the future stretching ahead full of challenges she now knew she could face. She touched her father's dog tags at her throat, feeling the weight of them, the memory. "I hope I made you proud," she whispered. From somewhere deep in her memory, she felt his answer. "You did, Riley girl. You did." And for the first time since he'd died, since her world had fallen apart, since she'd been broken and humiliated and tested, Riley smiled, truly smiled, and believed it.